Hello and welcome to the Wildcard edition of the Play Action Podcast. Matt Brown, Joe Fortenbaugh. Joe, they thought they got rid of us last week, but we don't go away that easily. We're like a parasite. We're just going to see. We're going to stay around as long as it takes, man. We're
like cockroaches. 1 in 7 of us is going to survive that nuclear war.
Yeah, I mean, you guys thought after week 17 that this thing was done, but no. We're back for more. 4 more weeks of this. We're going to take you through the Super Bowl here and hopefully win us some money along the way. A decent little week 17, kind of. The Saints threw a monkey wrench and a couple of different little teaser things that I had going on, but overall still made a little bit of money. Not what I would have liked. Certainly didn't like the Saints blowing it right there at the end, Joe.
We drilled the Niners. We drilled the Buffalo Bills. Those were 2 sweat-free affairs. And anytime you get a sweat-free affair on NFL Sunday, you got to be feeling pretty good. We did swing and a miss on a few teaser plays. We're going to look to rectify that today because there are several games on the wild card slate, even though there's only 4 total games, several games that shape up nicely for some teaser action.
Yeah, absolutely here, guys. Taping this on a Tuesday evening. So we're going to give you all the best information that we have as of this moment, whenever we are taping this here. And of course, all the odds that we reference here, you can find on sbrodds.com. Stick around. We'll talk about the college national championship game as well as our best bets of the week here at the end of the show. But Joe, just real quick, a couple of the teams that we're not going to talk about today are these 4 teams that are on bye this week, but there is certainly some things to look at with these. I mean, specifically coming out of Pittsburgh for sure, because they're dealing with the most marquee of injuries that isn't Carson Wentz. And the Philadelphia Eagles obviously rolling with Nick Foles. I don't know how many people even see them surviving the divisional round. That's a conversation for another day. Pittsburgh and Antonio Brown, that's where the focus is going to be. Now, granted, this was an injury in week 16. So he sits out week 17. That's 1 week to get ready. You get a bye week. That's 2. And then to be honest with you, you should be able to beat Tennessee, Kansas City, Jacksonville, or I should say, and as well, the Buffalo Bills without Antonio Brown, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers hosting that game. So that gives you essentially 4 weeks to get ready for the New England Patriots. It's going to be tough because it's Mike Tomlin, and Mike Tomlin never outcoaches Bill Belichick, but that's the team right now to focus on. I'd say of those 4, who do you feel has the, I don't want to say most upside, I want to say least downside outside of the Patriots? Take them out of the equation. Basically what I'm trying to do is guide you to Minnesota right now and see how you feel about them, because these guys are dangerous. Yeah, I mean, listen, whenever you look at what they've been able to do with the two-head, listen, they lose Dalvin Cook and then replace it with Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon and been able to have decent production on the ground here. Who would have thought it? You lose your starting quarterback, come in with Case Keenum. Who'd have thought what's going on there? And then this defense has just been playing nearly every single week at elite levels here, Joe. I mean, there's not a lot to hate about this Minnesota team other than the fact that they're weirdly talking about this quarterback situation again. I just don't even understand what's going on here. I mean, like, you've made the playoffs, you've got to buy, you're doing whatever. Like, just let Case Keenum be, please. Like, and tell Teddy Bridgewater he's your backup, and that's just the way it's going to go. I mean, what's going on here?
I mean, we've talked about this all year, and maybe this is what fuels fire for Case Keenum to keep him motivated week in and week out. I'd have to.
Who cares if Sam Bradford's practicing? I mean, who cares?
I mean, I would not want to turn. Listen, let's think worst case scenario. If you switch from Keenum to anybody and you lose, that's fireable. Like, people are going to call for your head. If you stick with Case Keenum and lose, not many people are going to call for your head. No one's going to yell and scream that you should have moved away from a guy who's had an unbelievable breakout season to a guy in Sam Bradford who, let's face it, like, you've been around forever and you've never really done anything. Sammy excuses is what I call him, because there's always an excuse. Well, the Rams didn't have any receivers. Well, he's injured. Well, he doesn't have an O-line. Well, he doesn't have a running game. Like, at some point, the dude's been around long enough. He is who he is. He's an average NFL quarterback who can hold it down a bit, but he can't stay healthy. So there's a ton of risk there. I would say this about Mike Zimmer and the Minnesota Vikings. This might be the most compelling coach of the year race I've ever seen in my life. Sean McVay, what he's done with the Rams, Mike Zimmer, what he's done with the Vikings, Sean McDermott, what he's done with the Buffalo Bills. I mean, that's not even talking about the job Todd Bowles did with the Jets, the job that Belichick always does in New England, the job Kyle Shanahan.
And even Sean Payton in New Orleans. I mean, this was a team that everybody buried after the first 2 weeks of the season. And then they rally back and become one of the most dangerous teams in the NFL. So I'm with you, man. This has been a really good season. Only a couple of pretenders in my eyes that have gotten through here. And
That's basically the way we can kick this off. The Tennessee Titans are heading to the Kansas City Chiefs here. On the Titans side of the ball, they get in after beating the Jags 15-10, despite the Jaguars playing their starters in that game. DeMarco Murray sat out. Derrick Henry had 117 total yards from scrimmage. On the Chiefs side, they sat both of their starters in that one, Joe. Still beat the Broncos in Denver. I mean, going to be coming into this one pretty healthy. The only thing, they did lose their backup running back in Akeem Hunt. Went out and signed C.J. Spiller to back up Kareem Hunt in this game here, close out the season on a 4-game win streak. I'll admit, I'd written off this Chiefs team. I did not think that they were going to be able to get it done. I really liked what I saw in the Chargers. Chargers did go out and win in week 17, just didn't get the help that they needed here. And so here they have a game at Arrowhead against this team that I think is a complete sham.
I have no interest in watching this game. I know I'm not supposed to say that, but let's face facts. The Saturday wildcard game, the first Saturday wildcard game every year, it's like Houston and the Bengals, Houston and the Derek Carr-less Raiders last year. I mean, this garbage. This Tennessee team has zero excitement whatsoever, but that doesn't mean we can't bet this thing and find a way to make a little bit of money. Last 28 road games, Tennessee's covered 8 times. 8 times in 28 road games. There are many former players that believe Arrowhead Stadium is the most hostile of all environments in the National Football League. And if you don't believe it's the most hostile, it's definitely top 3 with CenturyLink and probably New Orleans. We can leave that argument for another day. But Arrowhead is extremely difficult as a venue to go in, silence that crowd, and win a football game. You saw what happened to the Chargers when they tried to do it a few weeks ago.
I'm glad you bring this up here, because this was one of the points that, again, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the show, and I should have been better about this. These are things that I normally pick up on. Even when teams don't give me the eye test of looking like a good team, I still should pick up on things like this. So here are the Chiefs' home games, opponent scores this year. All 8 home games. 20-20, 19-19, 16-15, 13-13. They did not give up more than 20 points at home to a single opponent all year long. And they actually played some better teams than what I consider this Tennessee team to be as well. We look at a 44.5 point total here in this one. You can get 8s and 9s out there in favor of the Chiefs here. Joe, is there any way in this one that you feel comfortable enough to lay the 8 points, or is this something that maybe you're kind of shying towards a total?
I'm going to lay the 8, and I'm also going to play a teaser here because I don't think there's a situation in which Kansas City can't cover 2 points in this game. I think the moment is going to be too big for Tennessee. I saw them on the road a couple weeks ago here in Santa Clara against the Niners. The Niners ate them up with Jimmy Garoppolo and less talent than this Kansas City offense has. Andy Reid is going to study that tape, and he's going to use it to exploit Tennessee. Then in a must-win situation against the Jags team that was like, we're already kind of locked into the 3. There's not a ton of motivation. They needed every second to basically survive that matchup. All season long, Tennessee's a team that wasn't trending well in December. They were limping in down the stretch. Where do they excel as a football team? Like, you've asked this question before, so I'm going to just take it from you. Where do they excel? What's the best element of this team? I think you've got a lot of inexperience on the coaching staff and on the roster when it comes to the postseason. Arrowhead is not a soft landing spot to make your debut for Marcus Mariota. I think the Chiefs rock him here.
Yeah, I look at this game and the total really sticks out to me, and the under really sticks out to me here. Like, we talked about how well this defense has played at home, and then you look at how this game is going to potentially play out. And, you know, Marcus Mariota in this must-win game against the Jaguars this past week, and I understand the Jaguars have a good pass defense. They only let him throw the ball 21 times, Joe. They only let him throw the ball 21 times in that game. I mean, this seems like, and then you look after Andy Reid handed over play calling duties, and they got back to using Kareem Hunt yet again, getting this guy the 25 touches a game like they have been. I think that that's the way they feel. They are going to win here. They're going to grind. They're going to use the guys that kind of got them there. And listen, if you're on the Titans side, I don't think you have much of a choice. I think they would love to be able to pass the ball. I just don't think they have the offense to be able to pass the ball. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, it's one of those things where I think they look at it and go, wow, we would really like to be able to pass the ball on this team, but they just don't have what they need to do to get it done in the pass game. Marcus Mariota has been woefully inaccurate this year. I mean, the big plays he's made has always just been with his legs this season. It hasn't been with his arm at all. And I see 44.5 here. I see a defense that hasn't given up more than 20 points at home in any home game this entire season. I think I felt really, really hard looking at the under here. And like you said, if you wanted to combine that with a teaser to take this down to 2 and bump this up to 50.5, certainly something I could be all about as well, because this is just not a game that I see just becoming a shootout in any stretch of the imagination.
Now, to do a teaser, obviously, we have the front half of this situation locked up if we're going to go ahead and take Kansas City. I wonder if there's another game on Saturday that we might be able to tease as well.
Yeah, if we're looking at how these things look right now here, Atlanta Falcons heading over to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. Of course, the Falcons get in. They beat the Panthers 22-10. Matt Ryan does throw for over 300 yards against that Panthers defense there. If you're looking at how the Falcons are going to look from an injury standpoint heading in here, they did lose a starting guard. Andy Levitra is going to be out, tricep injury, placed on IR here. So they did lose a starting offensive lineman. That is definitely could be significant. Devontae Freeman, Julio Jones both didn't practice on Tuesday, Joe, but everyone just says those were maintenance days for those veterans, obviously guys that get beat up pretty heavily through the course of a game. So just more of a maintenance thing there. The Rams on their side of the ball, they rested their starters in a 34-13 loss to the 49ers. Cooper Kupp was kind of a little banged up, so he was going to sit regardless, a little bit of a knee issue, but everything leans to him being perfectly fine to go there. They just wanted to make sure that he was going to be nice and healthy for this playoff game here. So the Falcons head on the road to Los Angeles in this one, looking at a 48.5 point total here, 6.5 point spread in favor of the Rams. How does this, jumping off the page to you, how does this feel?
A teaser with the Rams and also laying the points again. Nothing sexy about where I'm going here. 2 big favorites, 2 teases, and 2 straight up bets. I think the marquee matchup in this game is Steve Sarkisian, Atlanta Falcons offensive coordinator, against Wade Phillips, Los Angeles Rams defensive coordinator. Wade Phillips has done a remarkable job with this team, and he's got so much experience and advice that he can give to Sean McVay. The delegation of duties for that team is top notch. McVay handles the offense, and he's working with them on the sideline when the defense is on the field. Phillips steps in. He's essentially a second head coach. He handles the defense. Things have worked out tremendous for this team this year. What indicates, let me scratch that for a sec. One of the most telling indicators of a truly talented football team is simply their ability to win on the road. Not necessarily cover, but can you go on the road and win? Historically, go back 5, 10, 15 years and check all the teams that are in the playoffs. They win an alarming percentage of their road games. That's what defines the difference between good teams, above average teams, and the teams that are like Tennessee. And that's why I don't think Tennessee is going to do anything in Kansas City. Atlanta is 1-5 against the number over their last 6 road games. Atlanta and Matt Ryan haven't covered a road playoff game in their last 4 attempts, right? So you got a dome team that's coming outdoors on the West Coast. You're going to have to do a long travel date for this one, which I don't know how much that plays in, but Steve Sarkisian is not going to outgame Wade Phillips, and Sean McVay has already been looking ahead to this game. Rest assured, his advanced scouts have been putting together packages for everyone they could possibly get in the first round. They're going to hit the ground running with this game. I think they come in looking better prepared, well rested, fresh, aggressive. McVay does an excellent job of keeping the game manageable for Jared Goff. That's what's important for a young quarterback. It won't happen in Tennessee for Mariota. It will happen in LA for Jared Goff.
Yeah, what you look right here and what I see is a guy that really gets it. Look, this Rams team, you could say there was some motivation for them to lose that Week 17 game as it was anyway. That also being said, he understood there is absolutely no reason for me to put my starting quarterback, to put my starting running back out there. He understood we're buried if we don't have Gurley in this game. We're buried if we don't have Goff in this game. There's no reason for me to risk this whatsoever. And like you said, you're going to get a fresh quarterback, a fresh running back. And this time of year, that is incredibly important. We talk about these maintenance days that Devonta Freeman and Julio Jones needs on a Tuesday as we sit here and tape this. Julio Jones, a couple of different times as you watch that game, make a catch or get hit, whatever it might be, get up really gingerly, kind of hobble a little bit over to the sideline. And do you not think that Julio Jones would have liked to have had a week to get rested? Do you not think that some of these nicks and bruises and things like that, he would have loved to have been able to get healthy heading in here? So listen, if you're getting an 80% Devonta Freeman, an 80% Julio Jones, and a 100% Todd Gurley. I'll tell you right now, man, this screams to me like a Rams beatdown. I mean, I am all over. Listen, the number obviously indicates that early as well. It opened at 4.5. It jumped all the way to 6.5 at these places. A lot of people feel the same way we do, but basically at every facet, I mean, you could make an argument at the quarterback position if you're a Matt Ryan believer, but nearly at every single facet of the game, there's a spot that I feel that the Rams are pretty good, at least comparable when it comes. I mean, obviously you're not going to say Robert Woods is Julio Jones, but just about every other spot, you're feeling pretty good about this Rams team. This 6 number to me, like you said, screams a teaser. And if you want to just go ahead and lay the 6.5, I feel perfectly fine with that. I think this is a beatdown.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'd love to have some banter back and forth with you and tell you you're wrong, but what does Atlanta have? They've got some playoff experience. The Rams don't strike me as that team that's going to be overwhelmed by the big stage. They strike me as that team that the ignorance and the inexperience might actually help them. They might just go out and ball without thinking about it. Again, Sean McVay puts his players in good positions to do what they do best. This turnaround for Jared Goff has just been remarkable, and that's a large part of that is due to coaching. And Atlanta's side, not only are they limping in like you've been talking about, it doesn't even feel like they should be here. Like, it doesn't feel like they should be here. Cam Newton had him on the ropes late. Cam was awful in that game. Absolutely awful. Like, Atlanta should not be in the playoffs this year. I give them credit. Dan Quinn and that coaching staff, to lose the Super Bowl last year and to come back this season and get to this point,
especially
well done.
As strong as that division was. I mean, as strong as the NFC was.
Teams.
Yeah. I mean, like,
so,
this is
job well done, but this is where it ends. I think they might get punched in the mouth early. Todd Gurley's going to roll through these dudes.
Yeah, I agree 100% there. Buffalo Bills, after their miraculous last second score. Oh, not by them, but by one Andy Dalton to get them into the playoffs here. Going to head to Jacksonville. The Bills get into the playoffs, like we said, with Andy Dalton throwing that touchdown late. However, Joe, this is going to be a big one, something we're going to monitor all week long, and this is certainly something that could sway our opinion one way or another, depending on how it goes. LaShawn McCoy did go down early in that game. If you were watching, not a good thing, high ankle sprain. I imagine he is going to do every single thing he can do to possibly get into this game, but with the way that Shady plays, ankle injury to me has me a bit nervous as to how that's going to go. He is officially a game time decision on the Jacksonville side of things. Lost their last 2 games, according to, of course, that 44-33 beat down there by the Niners, and then lost to the Titans and led them into the playoffs there. Tackle Cam Robinson and Marquise Lee didn't play this past week. Both of those guys are questionable for this week. Marquise Lee obviously had to step up and be the de facto number 1 after Allen Robinson went down. Now he hasn't played, questionable for this week. You lose a tackle in Cam Robinson, so maybe Jacksonville comes into this one hobbling a little bit as well. Joe, we have a 39.5 point total and 8s and 9s out there on the Jacksonville side.
And that's exactly the point. You have a really low total, but you've got a massive favorite that has a lousy, inconsistent quarterback, right? So this reflects the lack of confidence in the Buffalo Bills and specifically the injury to Shady McCoy. But let's talk about the mindset of these teams for a second. On one side, you have a Buffalo Bills team that hasn't been to the playoffs since 1999. It was the longest drought in professional American sports. Their fan base, whether they lose by 60 or win by 60, is going to love them just the same for getting to the playoffs. Bills fans have been starved for this. They are going to travel well. So don't expect a great home field advantage for Jacksonville here. That's number 1. Number 2, this team is on house money. They're absolutely on house money. Tyrod Taylor, everyone can play loose. People thought before the season started, these guys would get the number 1 pick. I was under the belief that they were just tanking off the season. And here they are in the playoffs. So I think you're going to have a very loose Bills team that lets it all hang out. Flip side, Jacksonville. You got a lot of pressure. I mean, I know you haven't been in the playoffs in a while and you shouldn't have pressure, but you do, because your quarterback situation is what you've been hearing about all year. All year it's been, man, if only Jacksonville had a quarterback. Man, if Blake Bortles wasn't the guy there, Jacksonville could win this whole thing. They've got such a great defense. But it's Blake Bortles. And the last 2 weeks, he has been garbage. Now, granted, his home road splits are very, very different, and he plays better at home. But it would not surprise me one bit to see Bortles go out there and crap his pants, and they win this game by 2 or 3 points late. Buffalo, if I'm Buffalo, I'm selling out against the run. I'm just selling out against Fournette. And I'm hoping that Bortles turns it over enough where I can pull off a miracle. I don't think that's that complex of a game plan.
Listen, you have a banged up wide receiver core, and then even if they are able to play, Joe. So yeah, you got Marquise Lee. This is certainly not the guy you went into thinking was going to be your wide receiver 1 this year. And then you got a couple of rookies that are playing behind him as like your number 2 and number 3 there. So whenever you look at this Jacksonville team, you got Buffalo, who's been pretty bad against the run. But if you sell out, like you're saying, and just say, hey, Blake Bortles, if you can beat our one-on-one coverage, which is what we're going to run, and that's just the way it's going to be, then more power to you, and we'll just lose this game. I think that's the game plan Buffalo has to have going into this one, because we've seen Blake Bortles time and time again get under pressure and just chuck the ball up. And he doesn't know where it's going. No one knows where it's going. It ends up in the other team's arms. You got Tre'Davious White, who's been playing great corner there for Buffalo, one of the highest Pro Football Focus rated corners on the season. So he should be able to play a lot of single coverage and be successful playing a lot of single coverage here. This definitely feels like a number that was thrown out there with the thought that LaShawn McCoy is not going to play, because to me, if LaShawn McCoy was playing here, I think this is probably more in the 6 range, in my opinion. That being said, Joe, we've seen Tyrod Taylor play without weapons a lot of times in his career, and has still had success. This guy's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in all of the NFL. I have no idea why this organization hates him. When he had Sammy Watkins was injured like every other game, and somehow they would still go out and have good games. They're like, who's he have to throw it to? And they would still figure out ways to win, still figure out ways to be competitive there. I think they put up a showing here. I'm going to take the points, man. I got to be honest with you. I'll take the 9s. There's 9s out there. I'll take the 9s, and that's with or without Shady playing in this game.
I'm with you. If Bortles burns me, so be it. I can live with that. What I can't live with is siding with Bortles, watching him play terribly, and then say to myself,
why did I
have watched this guy play terribly his entire career? Why did I assume anything would be different here? The Bills just need to focus on discipline. Don't commit too many penalties. Don't commit stupid turnovers. Take what they give you. Sometimes a punt's going to be a good situation here. If Bortles, I could see Jacksonville coming out really tight in this game, saying we're not going to let Bortles lose it. So they focus on the run. They get tight as the game goes on, and you have all these points in your pocket late. Remember, Jacksonville's not going to try to step on anyone's neck in this game. They want to survive.
Yeah, and you've got a Leonard Fournette here that has been playing banged up all year long, never got healthy, and basically said as much, about a month ago that he was just going to play out the rest of the season banged up. Like, that's basically the way it goes. He hadn't gone over 100 yards in a while. You can definitely tell when you watch him play, not at 100% out there. So, a lot to like, I think, about the Buffalo side in this game. Carolina heading to New Orleans. Carolina, if you look at their running back situation, Jonathan Stewart's dealing with a back injury. Ron Rivera came out on Tuesday, did say that he thinks he's going to be fine. They do have a 2-time Pro Bowl guard in Trey Turner, who missed his 3rd game in a row with a concussion. So that's seems like a pretty bad situation. If the independent neurologist is not clearing him after 3 weeks in a row, probably pretty questionable for him there as well. On the Saints side, pretty fine on the injury front. But of course, as we mentioned, they did lose to Tampa Bay in the last seconds of that game on the road there. Certainly something that didn't help me in Joe's bankroll very much there. This game sitting at 6.5 out there with a 48.5 point total. There is a 49 over at Just Bet. Again, you can see all these at SBRodds.com, Joe.
So in the last 3 years, these two being divisional opponents, they've met 6 times. 6 times in the last 3 years. You know how many times the Panthers have covered the number? 0. They haven't covered a single spread against this team in 3 years. We saw them get together early in this season, back in week 3, where New Orleans went to Carolina. And we were probably talking about how, well, the Saints tend to struggle a little bit more outdoors. I know Carolina hasn't been great, but they're coming off that huge New England performance, or we're somewhere in the neighborhood of that, blah, 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 blah. And the Saints roll in, and what's the final here? 34-13. Rock them. They get together later in the season, and it's 31-21 Saints at the Voodoo Dome. How do I trust Cam Newton? Like, that's the big question I have every time it comes down to handicapping a Panthers game. How do I trust a quarterback who refuses to work on his mechanics? Like Brady and Manning, these guys worked with quarterback coaches every offseason to focus on mechanics. Every year, even at the height of their careers, especially Peyton Manning, he was still working with Duke's David Cutcliffe on his mechanics. Newton is constantly throwing off his back foot, constantly airmailing passes. He's a guy that just thinks talent alone is great. And he's got all these gifts, but he's not willing to put the work in. He just doesn't look like a guy who's willing to put the work in. Meanwhile, Drew Brees is the epitome of that. So I think between the crowd noise, the running game, the way the Saints have played defense, if things go bad for Cam early, they go bad for Cam all day long. I really like the Saints in a teaser, and I'm leaning right now towards playing them straight up as well. If I'm having a good weekend going into this game, I'm probably dumping on the Saints late.
Yeah, if you look here, I mean, this is one of those things, I love stats and I love like the advanced statistics and different things like that, but I think this is an eyeball game for me. I've watched a lot of the Panthers. I've watched a lot of Cam Newton over the last 2 months. And whenever you watch Cam Newton, you see a lot of times what you saw this past Sunday, 14 of 34. That's a 41% completion percentage. You can go back a little bit further in a game against the Jets, I might add, 11 of 28. That's a 39% completion percentage. You go back a little bit further against this Falcons team played earlier in the season, 13 of 24. I mean, this is a guy that is, hovering around or below 50% at a lot of games when it comes to completion percentage.
That's embarrassing. That is so unacceptable when you're going against a quarterback who year after year completes over 70% of his passes. Drew Brees has already broken that record twice in his NFL career. This guy can't even hit on half of his throws.
Yeah, I mean, you look when he's playing good secondaries, Minnesota, 13 of 25. That's 52%. What do we have here for the Saints? We have a healthy secondary. We have good Marshawn Lattimore, Ken Crawley, both guys who are rated in the top 25 when it comes to Pro Football Focus. Whenever they grade out these guys, I really, really, really like what I see from these guys as well. And then you look at this, who he has catching the ball. Listen, Devin Funchess is fine, but this is not a true number one wide receiver by any stretch of the imagination. You've got Greg Olsen out there hobbling around on a bad foot, who seems like every time he comes down awkwardly, he has to take a couple plays off because the foot goes into pain. Christian McCaffrey's been a non-factor for this team over the last month. I don't know what was going on. For a while there, they had schemed all these plays for him and seemed like, okay, this guy's finally about to become this major factor for this squad here. He's going to have a huge role, and then just not really the case, and just hasn't really got clicking with Cam for whatever reason. I don't know what that might be. And then you look at the secondary receivers here, and there really isn't any. They don't have any secondary receivers here. So I see a situation, a couple of different ones here, Joe. One, I like the Saints to win. And two, I think this is an under situation. I'm wondering where the points are going to come from on the Panther side of the ball here. 48.5. I think a lot of people just see the Saints at home in the Dome and just assume they're going to light it up. But Joe, you and I have talked about this on this podcast for several different weeks. This is a new look New Orleans team. They run the ball a ton. They love to use Kamara and Ingram time after time after time. And the thing is it continues to work. So they're not going to get away from anything that's been working for them for this entire season long. And so what makes us think that this is still this run and gun, Drew Brees throwing 50 times a game, throwing for 350 yards? That's just not the case. And they're going to run the ball. They're going to play ball control. And this total's too high. It's far too high for the way that these two teams play ball.
Here's another element to that. If you watch Cam Newton, he is in no rush to get to the line of scrimmage and snap the ball. Like, Newton is very casual, getting the play call, relaying it to his team, coming out to the line, surveying the defense, doing that, ready. Like, it's just such a slow, glacial type process. And when you're jamming the ball down someone's throat and your defense is playing top-notch football, that works. That establishes tempo. But when you go to New Orleans and you can't hear each other in the huddle, and then you see something you don't like and you want to change the play and it's loud and people can't hear you, there are going to be delay of game penalties. There are going to be miscommunications. There's probably going to be a couple plays in this game where the center snaps it back and Newton's not ready. Like, there's going to be a problem handling the Voodoo Dome. That's going to be the biggest factor. That noise and Newton's unwillingness to push the tempo a little bit and move a little bit quicker is ultimately going to doom him.
You point that out, and just to make you feel even smarter there, Joe. I know this was something that you just saw with your eyes anecdotally, but let me go ahead and secure this for you right here. Through week 16, so the week 17 stats haven't been updated yet, but we can feel pretty confident that
I'm sure it didn't change.
That it's not going to change too incredibly much. Carolina playing at the slowest pace in the entire NFL. So whenever you look at that, there you have it.
Only a gambler would see that too. That's a guy who bet the Panthers against the Jets and needed to cover like a 2-score line, and he was just moving his ass at a glacial pace the entire game. Now they ended up covering late, but that was a miserable performance he had against the Jets. He wouldn't throw the ball over the middle of the field. It was off his back foot down the sidelines virtually every time. It was just. It's dumbfounding to me that he won an MVP award, a Heisman Trophy. He's been to the Super Bowl, and he has every gift you could possibly imagine: size, speed, intelligence. And yet he just doesn't want to work on his mechanics. Like, he doesn't want to improve his mechanics to become the best possible quarterback. Like, as he gets older, his game is just going to severely drop off, because the guys like Brady that stick around, it's because of the mechanics. It's because of the details. Newton's not exactly detail oriented.
So looking right here, 29.6 seconds per play. That is the slowest in the league. But then you look at New Orleans, 28.8 seconds per play. That's 28th in the league. So we have two teams playing at a very slow pace here, Joe. So this could be one of those situations where I feel even better now that we look at it a little bit deeper about the underplay here. And this one. All right, switching to college football, guys. This is, as you probably watched on New Year's Day, just a couple of good games. I mean, listen, if you're into defense, you like the second game. If you're into offense, you were into the first game. Either way, Joe, highly entertaining games.
Absolutely. The Rose Bowl was fantastic, and I highly recommend going to the Rose Bowl if you ever have the opportunity. Even if it's not one of the semifinal games for the playoff, the Rose Bowl is an awesome experience. You tailgate on a golf course. The weather in Pasadena on January 1st is always immaculate. The stadium, the pageantry, the field, the bands performing. I went to the game twice. I had a friend who played at Michigan, so I went to Michigan USC when Matt Leinart stomped them, and then Michigan Texas when Vince Young went off. So Michigan lost both those games, but both experiences were fantastic. And that game lived up to the hype and then some. Baker Mayfield played fantastic football. The problem is, I think Lincoln Riley and the Oklahoma coaching staff got a little too, I don't want to say complacent. They got a little too tight late. They should have opened it up. They should have let Mayfield win it. That was on them. And they should have kicked that field goal on 4th and 1. Go for it there. Look at the scoreboard. There's close to 100 points in this game. If you can't convert 1 yard with the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback and that offense, then what are you even doing out there? Like, that's bad play calling.
For those of you out there that are watching this that play poker, I'm sure you're familiar with FPS, and people call it fancy play syndrome whenever you're playing poker. There was a little bit of that going on with Oklahoma there towards the end of that game, running plays that they hadn't run all game when really it wasn't necessary to run those type of plays in those situations. I think there was a little bit of choke going on there, a little bit of the game got too big for a young coach. But hey, listen, hats off to them. I mean, listen, they still had a really good season, and certainly the game was right there for them. They were just not able to complete it. But what we have is Georgia and Alabama in the finals here. Georgia, obviously with Kirby Smart as their coach, a former assistant of Nick Saban. If you're into these weird stats that absolutely mean nothing, Nick Saban is 11-0 against his former assistants, beating them all by at least 14 points. So if you want to take a statistic that doesn't necessarily even apply to this, because it's a completely different team and Georgia's really awesome and all that, still Saban 11-0.
You don't think there's anything to that? Like, you don't take anything away from that?
I do think that I think here is one thing that it says is that most of these guys are actual disciples of Nick Saban, and they basically do a lot of the same things that he does, and he knows what they're going to do. I do believe that that is the case. So, for example, in that game on Monday, whenever we're sitting there watching that game, Georgia goes in at halftime. Georgia makes a halftime adjustment. They were getting burned through the entire first half on defense. They go out. What do? They come out, start running a ton of man. And that's exactly what Nick Saban did. Like, Nick Saban, if things aren't going right, he's just like, okay, we're going to man up, and that's how we're going to play. And if you beat us that way, then you just beat us that way. We're not going to get all cute with these exotic coverages and stuff. And that's exactly what Georgia did. And so pretty interesting whenever you see that type of stuff. And it does make your eyes kind of pop out, though. 11-0, and nobody's been closer than 14 points.
Yeah, I mean 4-0, and he wins by 6 points a game. It's like, okay, but 11-0, and he's railroading people. I mean, thanks a lot, Jim McElwain, for all your efforts at the University of Florida. But all right, so this is an intriguing one. I mean, the Alabama machine, they just hammered Clemson, and I think people watching that and then seeing the the relatively new face of Georgia football, right? Like no one has recognized Georgia as a national power for quite some time. Good program, but I think a lot of people see them as new, as different, and as inferior ultimately. Whereas here's the Bama machine. So this game comes out Bama -4.5 and then moves to Bama -4. I think that's telling, but I don't know if I want to bet against Saban in this spot. That was a wreck shop sort of game against Clemson, and he had everybody firing off the football. But I can't say I trust Jalen Hurts.
Watching that game, you never felt like Clemson had a shot. Like it didn't get a
first down.
Yeah.
Like I was just sitting there thinking, how are they going to string together like 3 or 4 first downs to get a drive going? Bama was all over Kelly Bryant all game. I mean, that kid didn't have a chance. So I think you and I are probably going to see this game the same way. My thought process was that the over under in this game was coming out about 40, and I still like the under. It came out, where is it now? Like 47?
It is come down now to 45.5, 45, which is, even still, right, seems a little high. So take a look at this. If you look at Alabama, they held opponents to 10 or fewer points 8 times out of the 12 games they played this year. So, I mean, whenever you look at that during the regular season, I mean, that's just that says so much about the way that this defense plays and the way that and what they're capable of doing. And like you said, when you watch that game from Monday, if they can, and I understand they're very, very fresh and they are having to play on just a week, basically like a regular season game here. But if they're in the backfield, even 60% as much as they were in that Clemson game, I loved what I saw from Fromm, but let's just be for real. I mean, he's not going to have time to do anything. I mean, this is going to be.
Here's what we're going to see. This is going to be a game that reminds me of one of these matchups with LSU, one of these SEC matchups where Bama's going to come out, and Saban's a genius with this, especially in these SEC games. He knows in the marquee attraction SEC games that there could be some nerves. So what he generally does is he leans on his defense. He doesn't do anything too creative offensively because he doesn't want to make any mistakes. But that defense wears you down. They play physical. They don't let you move the ball. They force punts. They hit you. They punish you. And eventually you make a mistake. And right about the time you make a mistake is right about the time they want to open it up on offense. You'll get a couple real quick back-to-back touchdowns, and then you feel like you're lost. You feel like you've lost the game. Clemson, we saw that Monday night. It felt like they had lost the game right at the beginning of the third quarter there when Bama put 2 scores back-to-back together. And I think that's why you can look to an under here. Bama's just going to want to feel them out and assert their will, and Georgia loves to run the football.
Yeah, people are going to look at us and say, Matt, Joe, y'all are crazy. How the hell do you play an under here when this Georgia team just played in a game with 100 points scored? And
I think that helps us.
And I understand that, but let's break that down a little bit further here. 1, the offense at Oklahoma is better than the offense at Alabama. 2, the defense of Alabama is significantly better than the defense of Oklahoma. So whenever you look at this, Georgia is not going to be breaking off these 40, 50, 75-yard runs and things like that, but they're still going to want to run the ball with Chubb and Michelle. So what's going to happen is they're going to run the ball the same amount. It's just not going to equal these massive, huge, crazy runs. It's going to run the clock more. Alabama, like you said, is certainly going to want to set the tone with their run game as well. I think this is a typical SEC type of game, a beat 'em up, bruising, really hard-nosed defensive struggle here where I see Alabama late in this game scoring a touchdown. Yeah, I think they cover, but I don't think it's anything where we're going to be at halftime looking and going, wow, this game's going to go for 100. That's just not going to happen.
I mean, if Fromm was able to handle the big stage of the Rose Bowl, I think he's going to be able to handle the big stage of this. That crowd's going to be awesome. Just totally unrelated to gambling. Yeah. The Alabama crowd and the Georgia crowd in Atlanta for the national championship. Like, that's what makes college football so wonderful, man. Just like that.
It's going to be super, super fun, but let's get back around to this. We're both leaning to the under here, and listen, not that I'm not 100% sure I'm going to play a side here because I do like the under so much, but if I do, I think Alabama covers. I understand that number. I understand that Georgia just put up a ton of points, but this Alabama team's a different animal than what they just saw, and as good as Fromm has played, this is still going to be a freshman quarterback starting a national championship game here. Certainly we've seen nerves take over better men than even Fromm here. All right, Joe, let's get to our best bets this week. I think both of ours come from the NFL. We do have a lean certainly in the national championship game, but I think we feel a little bit more confident about something in the wild card round here. So why don't you kick us off?
Teasers that involve the Saints and the Rams, I think, are good situations to be in right there. Home teams, you're going to be laying a 0.5 point with New Orleans. You're going to be in a pick'em situation with the Rams. I'd feel confident with that. Best bet of the week is going to be the Buffalo Bills plus the 9, which according to SBRodds.com, there are currently at least 3 of them out there. Bookmakers got a 9, Bet Online's got a 9, and then Just Bet has a 9 as well. For all the reasons we mentioned earlier, I don't trust Blake Bortles. And if I'm Buffalo, I'm coming into this game on house money. And my thought process with or without LaShawn McCoy is going to be, look, defensively, let's load the box. Let's not let Leonard Fournette beat us. Let's force Blake Bortles to beat us. And if he beats us, so be it. It's Blake Bortles. But if he doesn't, that's going to be your chance. Maybe a pick 6, maybe a crucial fumble, maybe the guy is a mess, and that is going to open up the door for you to take advantage. This is a lot of points in a game that is a total of about 40. I'm going to want those in my pocket late.
And also, we've seen Blake Bortles do it time and time again. I mean, I understand he has been better this year than last year, but that's not saying much. I mean, the way he played last year, the way he played last year
stunk in San Francisco
was absolutely pathetic. I'm going to take the under there in Carolina, New Orleans. I mean, like for everything we mentioned, listen, there's a 49 out there. Maybe this even creeps up because, as we know, there's going to be a lot more money concentrated this week. Not as many games to spread out, and people don't like to bet unders. People like to bet overs. They want to see points. They think that this New Orleans team is still this high-flying, crazy team. And we pointed out just now, Carolina plays at the slowest pace in the entire league. New Orleans at the 28th slowest place. I mean, like these are 2 teams that like to run the ball, that don't like to play very fast. And I think this is what we're going to see here. So I'll take the under 49 and hopefully maybe this thing even trickles up a little bit more. That would make me feel even more warm and fuzzy inside, Joe. So I can tell you this, that game I'm very much looking forward to. I think the Buffalo-Jacksonville game is super interesting. Interested to see how the Rams handle this complete turnaround there at home, but I'm with you. Tennessee and Kansas City can take a hike. That game can take a hike.
I'll leave you with this. Tennessee, while they still made the playoffs, Jacksonville's back in the postseason. The Rams are back in the postseason. The Bills are back in the postseason. And the 49ers went 5-0 down the stretch when Jimmy Garoppolo took over. And yet somehow, some way, as there's all this turnover year in, year out, the Cleveland Browns found a way to lose every single football game yet again. They are the most consistent team in the National Football League. Kudos to you, Cleveland, and Hugh Jackson, who had the audacity to say nobody else could do the job he did. I have an 11-month-old baby. I'm confident he could have lost every game.
And RIP bookmakers who have to put out win totals for the Browns next year, because how low can you make it? Yeah, how low can you make it? I mean, seriously, how low can you make it and still get action on both sides?
Okay, put it like this. If they had to put a win total out there right now, you have to make the decision right now. And here's how it works. If you lose the bet, you got to go to prison for a year. If you win the bet, you get $3 million. $3 million cash, tax-free if you win, prison if you lose. The Browns over-under is 2.5.
Wow, I was gonna set it at 3.5 and then take the under. 2.5 is such a good, because we were talking about this off air, and you guys.
I'm not gonna let you get a tie on 3.
The reason we're laughing here is because we were saying that no team should ever lose more than 3 games. Like 3 games should just be
3 wins you should have strictly because of ineptitude, scheduling, injuries. You should fall backwards into 3 wins every year.
Yeah, so that's why Joe set that at 2.5, and that's why we're laughing. It would be very hard to take the over, because I mean there's talent.
I don't want to hear what it would be hard to do. What are you doing? Don't play politics. You're going to prison and you're winning 3-0.
I have to. You know what? I have to play the odds, and I would take the over. But I would feel horrible.
They won 1 game the last 2 years, and your odds say that they're just going to come out and triple their production.
What are you doing?
I asked the question. I don't have to take a side there.
Yeah, so you're gonna punt on that. All right, guys, thanks for being with us, and we're glad to be back for the next 4 weeks here. This is going to be fun. We're going to make some money in the playoffs here. We're going to make some money in college football, and definitely close out the season on a high note here with that Super Bowl show that we do, and all the props and all the crazy stuff that comes out with that. For Joe Fortenbaugh in the Bay Area, for producer Robert, I am Matt Brown. We will see you guys next week.